All right, guys, before I get started, I just wanted to say a big thanks to the organizers. They did a great job on the Wizard of Oz theme. So maybe after we can pull back the curtain and see what's really going on there. Hey, I'm Reed Levesque. I work at RBC. It's not listed there for good reason. Legal reasons. So I'm head of solution engineering, and me and my team, we set up the Hadoop cluster. And this is a story about what worked and what didn't. So let's get started. Over here. All right, so we guess we started about 2 years ago, and we wanted to figure out how to get Hadoop into the bank. And so we had a bunch of really smart people, and we went to it. All right, so we're going to talk about a few things. We'll talk about technology, kind of what we actually got in place, use cases, what it took to get it there, deployment, kind of the technical bits. Won't be too technical, I promise. How we changed the organization, what was the impact? That one's big. And then what were the next steps? Once we got up, then what happened? So every company is a technology company. Some just don't know it yet. Well, 2 years ago, we didn't know it. We didn't know we were a technology company. Some of us did, but as a whole, we didn't. So my team decided that Hadoop would be a good solution for a problem we didn't know yet. But as technologists, we're always out there looking for cool tech, so Hadoop was that. This was the kind of traditional application that you'd see at RBC. So you'd have an application server that might be bare metal, might be a VM, definitely on-prem. You have an RDBMS, say Oracle, SQL, Sybase, we got them all. You got some NAS or SAN or some storage that isn't actually on that box. So the way to do it is, and I did this as well, you put the code on the box, you grab the data from the database, you do some processing, you put it back in the database, you maybe write some stuff to the NAS. It's a lot of data movement. That actually works. It's not the worst idea. It's not the worst idea until data gets too big. And then that whole thing falls apart. So we're at the Hadoop Summit, so what's the solution to that? It's Hadoop. Right? So Hadoop, you stop moving the data, scales better, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, I work at a big corporate entity, so it's not so easy. Not so easy to just bring in Hadoop. All right, so how do we do it? How do we actually get Hadoop into the organization? All right, so the first thing we need is a use case. Right, so we picked a technology, right? The old adage of SQL Server is the solution, now tell me your problem. So we picked Hadoop, now tell me your problem, and we'll see which one fits. Right? So let's try file archive. I talked about NAS, that's kind of crummy. What if we just replaced that network attached storage with this network attached storage? It's pretty good, data's online, so that's a bonus. We don't have tape backups. It's cheaper, better performance, scalable, easier to manage. You can even do compute on there, but let's ignore the compute for now. Okay, maybe we could do that. How about Etl Offload? Yeah, I think I saw that one in the keynote. Sounds like pretty good. Maybe we can take all our data stage jobs, rewrite them in Spark, Pig, Hive, whatever your language of choice. That'd be pretty good. It'd run faster. So instead of our batch taking 2 hours to generate a report they look at once a day, it could take 5 minutes. Yeah, maybe that's worth it. Maybe cheaper. That's good. Lower TCO, total cost of ownership. And it reduces our dependency on proprietary software. Right, we could use open source. That's pretty cool. Maybe we could replace our databases, those Sybase, Oracle, SQL Server guys. Right? There's a licensing cost there. What if we put the data here, put Hive on top of it? Okay, so just for reference, I think we were at Hive 13 when we started, Hive 0.13. So if anyone remembers that far back, you can realize how likely that was to succeed. Yeah, so we can do other things, right? You can store XML, you can compress your data. There's ways around it, sure. Seriously. So we could do a data-intensive compute grid. So we work at a bank. Cap markets has a lot of data, a lot of risk analytics. We have a bespoke compute grid for every single solution. So what if we took those computes and put them on Hadoop? Right? So instead of running our Windows C++ distributed application or Linux C++ or our Blade servers or whatnot, what if we just put that on Hadoop, wrote it in one of the frameworks, everything scales, we do MapReduce, we do Spark, and we get all those benefits. It's cheaper, we can do more analytics. We'll actually use the hardware, because I don't know if you realize, but if you have a bespoke cluster for each and every solution, then when that solution's not running, the hardware is sitting there sucking power and doing nothing. So that'd be great. And one less thing to manage, right? We just have one platform, so that'd be fun. Well, actually, none of them work. So all those guys, all those great use cases that I'm sure you've heard here at the conference, or have heard at previous summits, or everyone says, Hadoop is perfect for, it's like I took that from someone else's slide. None of them worked. Why? Because by the time you figure out the cost of doing the project to effectively do the same thing in a different platform, so you're taking your ETL from data stage, you're going to put it in Pig or Hive or whatever. By the time you figure out the project cost, whatever you've paid for the server and the license it's currently running, and the cost of setting up Hadoop for the first time, which I don't know how many of you have done, but let's be honest, that's not easy. And it's certainly not quick. So by the time you add all that up, it's about the same amount as you'd saved, or maybe a bit less. So it's not really a compelling thing. You can go to the business and say, hey, I'm going to save you $5. And it's going to take me 1 year. So we didn't get too many takers on that one. So what did work? I'm here talking to you. Clearly, we got something that worked. So in our case, we had a batch system that was taking 4 hours. OK, now I just said like 4 hours is fine, right? Some cases that is. You got one report that needs to be done by 9 a.m. If it takes 4 hours or 8 hours, as long as it's there by 9 a.m., it's fine. In this case, it wasn't, though. So in this case, the guys in cap markets and risk wanted to do some iterative analysis on their risk models. So if I'm going to do an iterative analysis and it takes 4 hours every iteration, that's not very useful. Never mind the fact that just to deploy a new thing would take weeks, so it'd be like 4 hours plus however long it takes you to deploy it. So this was net new functionality that we could only do in Hadoop. And that was the key. The key was that we found a use case that only this technology could solve. Now, OK, we're all technologists here, so let's but we could have solved it with something else, right? But Hadoop solved it the best. And so because we didn't have something else, we didn't have any sunk costs, we didn't have a lift and shift project, it was much more appealing. Oops. So, OK, great, now we got Hadoop. Actually, all those other use cases now make sense. So those guys that are telling you, let's do Etl Offload, or let's do database replacement, or you can do this for compute grid, they're not lying to you. That's a thing you can do in Hadoop. It's just not the first thing you can do. So now that we have a Hadoop cluster, we can actually do all these things, and we've done a few of them already. So totally works. Oh, geez. Sorry. OK, so how do we actually deploy this? So we figured out we've got our solution, right? That's Hadoop. We've got our problem. That was the iterative batch analysis. And so now how do we actually deploy this? What's the hard work that we have to do? Seriously. So we need to pick a distribution. OK. So some guys at the summit here, Yahoo, LinkedIn, others, I think they run their own distribution. Right? They have enough people, enough smart people, that they can take all 25 open source components, or however many they pick, and somehow make all the versions work together. So we're a bank in Canada, and getting 2 open source components to work together is sometimes a challenge. So 25 seemed a bit daunting. So OK, so we're like, OK, which one? Well, there's three major ones. There were others at the time, but these seemed like the ones to go with. So we did a bit of analysis. We didn't just draw straws. So we had a look. So like Hortonworks, it's all open source. Seemed to be moving pretty quickly. That's good. Cloudera, they got Impala. That's pretty exciting. Some other good support. MapR's got their special file system. All kinds of other stuff. That's pretty cool. In the end, actually, none of that mattered. None of the analysis we did mattered. It boiled down to some political decision. We ended up with Hortonworks, and off we went. So yeah, we all laugh. That's not to say it's a bad decision. I think any single one of those we would have picked would have been a good decision. Just pick the one that's the best for your use case. Okay, next we have to pick the hardware. A lot of hardware vendors here today. I don't do hardware vending, but I hear a lot of like, well, Hadoop's great, you run it on commodity boxes. Yep. So let's just buy commodity boxes. We'll go down to our local server retailer and we'll buy commodity boxes. That's a lot better than bringing in a big Teradata fridge, plugging it into the network cable and away you go. Or is it? Is it really better? It is at the compute layer, but not so much at the networking layer. So commodity hardware is really good. Commodity networking is not. So we talk a lot of it in big data about move the code to the data, and we're not moving a lot of data around. Well, you're keeping 3 copies of your data in HDFS. Like, it's gonna be chatty, right? You're writing a terabyte of data down. That's gonna be 3 terabytes, or rather 2 terabytes that has to go between those nodes. So luckily we set up Vertica before we started on Hadoop. And we didn't quite think this one through. So this was one of the lessons we learned. So we put a massive 4-node cluster on our network, and we set it there. So we put, I don't know, terabytes of data in there, and we ran dozens of queries, or was it 2 maybe? and what happened? We actually browned out the production network. So just by running queries on Vertica, because it was so chatty between the nodes, and its architecture isn't all that different from the way the Hadoop shuffle or whatnot works, we actually browned out the network. So what we didn't realize is that most applications aren't all that network chatty. So it's as our wonderful people in infrastructure have done, they decided to do a 20-to-1 ratio on network. So the switches have a 20th of the capacity for every server, right? So you got 20 servers that 1 gigabit at the switch. Well, that doesn't actually work for big data. So pay attention to networking. Where's the antenna? There we go. I don't know how many of you work at big enterprises, but before Hadoop, there were enterprise IT standards. So, I mean, some of these are just hilarious, right? So, Hadoop is super flexible. You get it. You know that because when you get it, there are 500 config fields you need to fill out. So you know it's configurable, right? The problem is that what user yarn runs as isn't very configurable, or how the disks should be laid out, or what OS settings should be set. These are all very prescriptive. So we ran into some issues where we have, as any good enterprise would, standards. And we've got naming standards on UIDs. So they start with 5 characters of which you have no control, and then if you're lucky, you get to pick 1. So the first challenge was, convincing people that that's not going to work for Hadoop. The next one was OS settings. I mean, when you're running a big data platform or you're running a Tomcat server, you need things very different. But with the cookie cutter approach that we had before all this, I mean, everyone was running Tomcat sort of applications. So that was fun. We had, I don't know if any of you ever heard of transparent huge pages. I mean, you'll run into, if you haven't yet, look it up. It's super, super painful. Makes things run like twice as slow or something. Anyway, by default it was off or something, it needed to be on, or vice versa. Root access, this was my favorite. Every vendor I talk with, they're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, just install it. Like, all you need is a sudo user. Like, who can sudo, like, passwordless sudo. I'm like, oh, that's a thing? I'm like, I remember that from university. But I mean, what we've done for all these guys is we've worked extensively with our infrastructure partners, and we've convinced them that A, we know what we're doing, which is important, and B, if we break it, we bought it. Right? So in that sense, we get root access whenever we need it, and off we go. Yeah. The other funny one, so our boxes had 24 disks in them. So what we wanted to do was, I think, use 2 for an OS, and then the rest just for data nodes, data directories. So the options were RAID 5 or RAID 5. We're like, well, no, we just want them like directly attached. Like, oh, no. We have to go through a RAID controller. So okay, hold on. So I remember this. So what we did is we put RAID zeros around every single disk. So every disk is on a RAID controller and it's running RAID 0 with a single node. So all kinds of fun stuff like that. Okay. So I talked a bit about working with our infrastructure partners at the bank. This was probably one of the most important things, was how we formed the team. So most applications before this, and maybe since, have it set up like this. So over on this side of the stage, we've got the developers. So we got a development manager, and over there in the corner are the people who actually have access to production, so like operations. So we got developers over here, operations over there, and infrastructure is down at the Starbucks at the corner. So, and nobody is really allowed to talk to each other, so you're playing a game of Chinese whispers. So the first thing we realized is like, that's never gonna work with Hadoop. Like I'm not gonna be able to send the operation guys over there, like, oh hey, run this script and let me know what happens. And then they'll be like, hey, infrastructure, like I need to root access. Like if you get it this week, that'd be great. Like so those things didn't work out so well. So what we did is we kind of brought everyone together. And we formed what I guess you'd call a network team. So we brought all the pieces that we needed to work with in the organization, like Unix security, the guys who control access to the boxes, the guys who set it up, the guys who run Linux, the guys who rack and stack it, and kind of made them part of our greater team. And then the crazy bit is we took the operation guys and we walked them all the way over here and had them sit next to the developers, and we called that one team. So that was the internal setup. Still is actually really good setup. The vendors were super helpful. So Hortonworks, as much as I poked fun at them earlier, were really good, and we had a few others as well who were super helpful. And while they won't tell you this out loud, they actually want to help you. And they want to do everything they can to be successful, for you to be successful, I should say. So use their help. They were totally worth it. Swear to God. There we go. Hey, we made it. So we made it into production, and then we had a big party, and that was fun. All right, that's our party right there. That's what we did. It was a quiet party. We're at a bank. So we got it into the enterprise. So did it actually change anything? Sort of changed something. So I guess we have to roll it back a bit. So a few months before we'd actually gotten it live into production, we were trying to drum up business, right? So that's kind of what we do internally. Our team is we talk to other teams and say, hey, it'd be great if you guys were on our platform. Like we've got some good use cases. Like, hey, AML, hey, fraud. Like, hey, you guys should be on Hadoop. And they're like, I hear what you're saying, Reed, but you're not in production. And so there were no takers. So we had that one use case I talked about before, right? The one use case, that got us to production. No one else would bite. Everyone's like, you're gonna fail. I don't wanna bet the farm on you guys. This Hadoop thing sounds magical. I want nothing to do with it. Then we went to production, and for about 2 weeks, it was radio silence. So nobody said anything. Nobody said, hey, congratulations, or you guys suck, or I was wrong. I mean, okay. They still haven't said that one, actually. So two weeks go by, and then the floodgates open. So all those people we were drumming up business with, they're like, oh my God, okay, you guys can actually do something. Let's start something. Let's start doing work with you guys. So what we started seeing is the infrastructure guys were there from the start, so they kind of got to understand what was going on. So they started, like, they've now done some cool stuff with some new networking, which I'm not at all qualified to talk about. They've started to understand, the importance of having these big data platforms and how to handle that at an infrastructure level, and how our team is special and we should be granted, root access whenever we need it and whatnot. The development teams, so huge talent attractor. So what ended up happening is all the good developers came out of the woodwork. So they're there somewhere, they're hidden within the organization, and then they see a cool project, and it's like ants, I don't know. They all swarm to it. So we got to meet a lot of great people across the organization and work with them on some future projects. Other stuff we found, like applications, maybe it made less sense to have those 5 bespoke applications. Maybe we just, maybe the team who sits right next to me can actually use the same stuff I'm using. So we found a lot of that. Management was actually the hardest one to come around. I mean, I always find with this, the technologists are the first ones to understand its value. And the management, being a bit further removed, takes them a little while. But I think we convinced them that, if they need data, so let's say they need data X, and the risk team is onboarding data X, well, maybe the finance team can just use data X, and they don't also need to onboard the same thing. Whereas before, it'd be like, oh, no, we can't share our NAS drives. Right? This is my NAS drive, it's permission for me. So I mean, we were starting to see a lot of that stuff. And the focus was on data, as opposed to my application does this, it's more I need that data. The business was oddly the funnest. So they had no idea what Hadoop was. I had things like, hey, I want to use that Hadoop database. Or what's this Hadoop thing? So we did a lot of roadshows internally, giving talks like this, but more about like, hey, what's Hadoop? Which I'm not doing here, because hopefully you all know that. And what we found is like, they get it, but they're a bit timid. They're not sure if they want to get on board. So we ended up doing a lot of kind of entry-level use cases, like, hey, let's get all our data and do some simple analytics on it, as opposed to, let's stream our credit card transactions and do real-time fraud analysis, which was the one that I had in my head. So I think we'll get there eventually, but we're not there yet. So what lessons did we really learn? So you'll hear a lot of talk about Hadoop, like, oh yeah, well, we get triple replicated, so like 2 servers fail, it can handle it, you won't lose any data, or this disk blows up or whatever. That's true. As a user, you won't notice. But as the guys running the platform, like it's still a pain in the butt if your hardware dies. Like you still have to go get new hardware, you still have to do downtime, you still have to rebalance and all that. So that doesn't actually go away for the guys running the cluster. Hadoop development is still development. So this is the one that tripped me up, because you hear a lot of talk about, oh, you just write it in MapReduce or Spark, and then the framework takes care of parallelizing it and scaling it up and whatnot. And that's true, it's true. But you still have to do the development. Right? You still have to have a developer go in there and write the code. And what we found is because it's a new paradigm, really only skilled developers can get in there. And I liken this to, I don't know how many of you remember the Harrier jump jet. I think it was UK had it. It's the plane that goes straight up and off, right? So they got that in, they realized quite quickly that this is a different plane than the ones that just go whee off, right? So they realized that pretty quickly. So okay, well hold on, let's get the best pilots first to try this, right? So the best pilots go woo, right, and they go off. So that's good. So then the best pilots, because they're good and don't necessarily realize how good they are, they're like, oh, this is easy. We can just open it up to everyone. Like there's nothing hard about this. And then what happened is, well, they started seeing right. And that's what we found with Hadoop as well, is that the skilled developers get it because they're really skilled and they pick up new things quickly. And sometimes they don't realize how skilled they are. So we opened it up maybe a bit too early, and I think we underestimated how much development time we needed. So yeah, with all new products come new error messages. So Hadoop has been at various stages of maturity through my time with it. But one thing's for sure, in all my time in IT, error messages are never as clear as you'd like them to be. So yeah, we had some fun ones. I don't remember them all. What we found out from all that is that there aren't actually that many experts. So we were doing a lot of stuff that nobody had ever done before, like anywhere. Or if they did, it was one of them, proprietary knowledge that they didn't want to share with us. So like one such example was we hooked up security. So we got Knox, Ranger, and Kerberos hooked up to our enterprise Active Directory. Now, saying it like that sounds super easy. Dealing with anything, I always say, I've never heard anyone say, I get to work with Active Directory today. That's made me happy. or this product has LDAP integration, and it works straight out of the box. Hadoop was a lot like that. The problem was that we were one of the first ones to actually do that. We found a lot of people running their own KDC on the side, but when you actually go to hook it up to the enterprise, that was kind of a new thing. So we got that working through a lot of trial and error. Oops. Okay, so we got it up. We figured out we needed to do more development. Kind of like, where can we take this further? What can we do next? Self-service tools. I can't say enough good things about self-service tools. We had one time, so again, we have formats, right? We're a big organization, so one of the things we have is file formats and data dictionaries. And we have these big giant files. They're like 2 gigs. They're 2 gigs in size, and they're really big, right? You're laughing, right? Because we were at a Hadoop summit, 2 gigs. But think of it, if you're an analyst and you don't have access to Hadoop, and you want to look at a 2 gig CSV file, like what do you use? You use Excel. Okay, well, I don't know if you ever tried opening a 2 gig CSV file in Excel. It doesn't work, right? Smoke comes out of the back, the monitor flashes. And so all of a sudden we have a big data problem with a 2 gig CSV file, which sounds ridiculous, right? So then we found these guys, Datamirror. I don't know if you've seen them, but they'll hate me for saying this, but it's effectively big data Excel. So there's more to it than that. But if you think about it, put your file in Hadoop, load it into this Excel-like format, like display, and then all of a sudden it changed people's lives. Like, I'm not joking. It changed the way they did their work. Because before, they'd be looking through that Word document, it's like, okay, column 14 is this, and it's okay, and then I think I can join it with this other one. And now they can just go look at the data, and they can try that join, and like, oh, hey, that does work. And so it just made the lives of the analysts so much easier. And the other one we found super useful is Arcadia data, which, again, they'll hate me for saying this, but you can think Tableau on Hadoop. And so Tableau works great. So back to my very first slide where we're moving data all over the place. Like Tableau works great when you've got an RDBMS with some small amount of data. Or you can take a look at some aggregated view. But what if you want to look at 7 years of client history or 7 years of trade activity to see if you can find any patterns? What if you want to do some interactive analysis and you want it to be visual? Right? So that's what we found was really good with these guys. The best part about it was we didn't need IT to do it. So we just set it up, gave it to the business people, who are actually a lot smarter than I think most IT people give them credit for. It's just that they're forced to talk IT and they don't really know what they're talking about. But when you give them a tool that makes sense to them, and they have the data that they already understand, and they can go at it, it's amazing what they get done. So to sum up, we've had to do a lot of selling internally. And I think that one of the biggest lessons I learned is that through this journey of getting Hadoop set up, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how Hadoop worked. I learned a lot about what use cases there are, what tools are out there, when to use Hive, when to use MapReduce, when to use Pig, when to use Spark. And I kind of forgot that nobody else had. So my team and I had come on this big journey, and we kind of forgot to bring the rest of the organization. So we had to go back, go back and get them, because we left them at the station. And so there was a lot of teaching them. And then the other thing was, because we'd learned so much, we had all these great use cases. One of my favorites was these guys. They had 7 years of trade orders and executions, and they're like, okay, what do you guys want to do with this? Like, it's a big data set. It's awesome. Like, well, the users want to see it in a tabular format. I'm like, okay, like Excel. Like, yeah, that's exactly what they want. I'm like, okay, and what are they going to do with that? Well, they're going to scroll through them, and then they're going to see which ones are bad. I'm like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. How many results do they get? They're like, but they want to filter. I'm like, okay, we filter. That's good. Because like, how many are we going to get back? Like, 100,000. So, okay, so let me get this straight. You want to scroll through 100,000 records, and they're going to manually look for that. Yep, that's exactly what the user asked for. Like, the user didn't ask for that. You just didn't do any due diligence. So then we did a demo for them, and we did that. So like, we did the demo, and like, so 5 minutes were, hey, look, here's a table, and you can scroll through it. And you're like, okay, great, it does what I want. Check. And it's like, and then the next 25 minutes were, hey, look at all these cool graphs, you can get actual insight out of your data. And so they were super. So they started talking to each other. They're like, oh my God, like they're talking, oh my God, I could do my job this way. Like, hey, I could solve this problem we had yesterday. And it's so great to see them actually do that. But the app team didn't know about all these cool things about Hadoop. It's because we forgot to tell them, effectively. So sharing the knowledge with everyone at the organization is super important. And that ends it. Thank you very much. So we have about 9 minutes. If anyone has questions, yeah, here, go ahead.
So as you build more and more applications on Hadoop, in 7-year Hortonworks talk about the modern data architecture.
Yep.
Is that really going to start to undermine the way the rest of IT does business? Are you going to see more disruption in the IT operating model as folks realize they have to operate in this new way?
So the question was, as we do more Hadoop applications, is that going to undermine the current way we do IT? I don't know. Undermine is such a strong word. I mean, take away, replace, those are nicer words. Steal from their hands.
Very specifically.
I don't know. I mean, if your role in life is to do all your applications on SQL Server, then you probably won't be too happy, right? If your goal is to do fun things that solve business problems, then you'll probably be more happy. I think most everything can be done in Hadoop. The question is whether it should be or not. I'm not skilled enough to answer that one. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
So how long has been your journey when somebody decided to buy Hadoop or Hortonworks
Yep.
to do timing and topologies?
Sure. So the question was, how long did it take from idea inception to getting to production? So I think we were looking at it, let's say June timeframe. I won't say the year, but anyway. And then probably by December, we like the same year, we decided to buy it. And then May, so about 6 months after we picked Hortonworks and away we went, it was about 6 months before we finally went live. So what we did to help that, that sounds a lot faster than I remember. What we did was we did it on a fairly small cluster, right? So we didn't do it like, let's do 5,000 nodes. We did it on, I think, 12 nodes to start. Not that it's that much harder to have many more nodes, but it's just one more thing that can go wrong.
And to follow up, in addition to some of the things you talked about, you also mentioned about risk and trades.
Yep.
So I would imagine if you integrated some kind of a compute platform or MATLAB or along with it.
Okay. So the question is, have we integrated some compute platform on top of Hadoop? So I think what you're referring to would be some sort of REPL, REPL, like some sort of interactive notebook. Is that kind of what you're asking? Yeah. Yes and no. So we had the data scientists tend to use PySpark because they know Python. But we haven't gotten that far yet. But I think that's kind of the next uncharted territory. We were talking about earlier, like yesterday, and what I found is that you need a very specific person to be able to use one of them notebooks, like a MATLAB type person. So it needs to be someone who's very analytical and someone who has enough programming, if you want to call MATLAB programming, enough programming ability to actually do that. And amazingly, there aren't that many people, at least at our organization, that fit that bill. That's kind of the prototypical data scientist, right? So we're building up that practice, but we're not there yet. All right, over there.
How do you see working in a financial institution that what you're doing from a flexibility point of view, the bureaucracy or the red tape around is changing? If you had to do it again, would you take the same stuff again, or are the processes getting more flexible?
Sure, okay. So the question is, what's the bureaucracy like at RBC, and how did that affect getting Hadoop set up. So I mean, that's like a 2-hour talk, so I'll try to summarize. So the bureaucracy is pretty rough. So a few of the things we did to get around it, and this was super important, is we went out and made relationships. So we went out and we talked to the guys in infrastructure, say, hey, we're gonna do this. Here's what it is, here's what Hadoop is. These guys are never gonna use Hadoop. What do they need to know how Hadoop works? But we went and told them, made them feel part of the team. And then we went to the next team and did all that. And what that did is it didn't take away the bureaucracy, but it cut down the SLAs, if you would, or the time from request to getting things done. And so I probably wouldn't do that differently because it worked really well, actually. Anyway.
What tools were your analysts using prior to this installation?
Okay, so the question is, what tools were analysts using before Hadoop? Excel? Excel, SAS, is that an analytical tool? Maybe we'll call that, yeah, so SAS.
So if they were using SAS, are they continuing to use SAS?
No comment. Yes and no. But we've heard all kinds of crazy stories where the file's too big to fit in Excel because like it's a bank and it really is a big analytical tool. Not that I think it should be, but it is. And like they'd have like this file and they split it in 64 and they'd load it into 64 Excel sessions and they'd have some macro to run and like 2 days later they'd get the result. So they just kind of worked around the problem instead of engaging IT because there really was no good solution. So, yeah, in the back of that?
So you mentioned about integrating with the enterprise workflows. Why did you do that? Like, what are the reasons?
As opposed to what?
Having your own standalone.
Okay, yeah, good question. Okay, yeah, sure.
We just had
So the question was, why did we decide to torture ourselves and use enterprise Kerberos instead of using a standalone KDC? Well, so I mean, back to the bureaucracy. So we certainly would not have been allowed to do that. Being able to run your own thing that lets people get onto the network with a user ID that isn't approved through the normal channels is something that's frowned upon. Then it's also a bit, like more practically, it's a bit of a pain in the butt because people have to have different user accounts, like one for that KDC and one for your normal Active Directory. But it was more to do with InfoSec type requirements. 3 minutes, more question? Yeah.
You actually have a lot of relational data. Are you bringing that into the data lake for analytics? And if so, how are you injecting?
Sure. So the question was, if you have a lot of relational data, and are we bringing that into Hadoop? So yeah, we have a lot of relational data. Yes, we're bringing it into Hadoop. Sometimes. We've used Scoop. We like Data Torrent, Apache Apex as well. Apache NiFi we've looked at. Haven't really done too much with that one. But it depends on the use case. If it's like the data is relational in SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, and I can do everything I want with it now, then it's kind of like, well, I don't want to bother moving it because there's no point. But if it's like, well, we want to store more data or that sort of thing, then we look at it. There's got to be that new edge to it. Yeah. No.
How did you decide your data architecture? Like, a few of the challenges we face is when you bring in data, either Etl Offload or for any business consumption, you partition by something, and then later on when you try to consume it,
Yep.
oh, I want it by so-and-so field, not by year, month, day by which you partition.
Yeah.
And you're basically scanning the entire partitions at that point. So how did you solve that, or did you solve that?
No, we haven't solved that one. That was one of the things that, I remember a funny story where these guys came to me, this application team, and they're talking about the REST API and WebHDFS, and they say, Reed, I can't find the copy API. I'm like, what are you guys trying to do? Copy data in Hadoop. Like, it's immutable data. What are you doing? And it was exactly that problem. We're like, well, these guys partition it this way, and we want to partition it that way. In the end, they sat right next to each other, so we just told them to talk. And that kind of solved that problem, because it turned out that their partitions were actually that close. But that is a hard one. Sorry, no idea. Yeah.
When you started educating your business after you've implemented, who did you start with first? What business group did you start educating first?
So the question was, how do we educate the organization? Is that it?
Which business group did you educate first? Who did you start with?
Yeah, sure. So we're in a part of the bank that has a bunch of functions, so risk, finance, compliance, HR, anti-money laundering, and fraud. So we kind of looked at those, and it's like, well, which one do we most want to work on? And then we went, like, okay, we'll go educate those guys, right? So in that case, it was AML and fraud and that sort of thing. But it was really whoever's interested. It wasn't a restricting them, but those were the ones we targeted specifically. And it looks like we're out of time. So thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you.